Good afternoon, Bishop Carcagno, members of the annual conference, brothers, sisters, siblings. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share with you about the work of the Council on Finance and Administration at 4:30. Yay! We can do this. I'm Kristen Stone King. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I serve as the chair of CFA and also as pastor of Epworth United Methodist Church in Berkeley. In this afternoon's presentation, I'll give you some highlights of this last year and our quadrennium that just finished. Yes, we did just finish a quadrennium. It seems like we didn't, but it did finish, and some comparisons from year to year. I'll also walk you through this next year's proposed budget and explain why CFA will be recommending a suspension of our standing rules in light of some of the impacts of the pandemic. And I'll lift up how we propose dealing with those impacts. But before I get into all of that, I celebrate with you that we are present here in body, in spite of the ravages of the pandemic, fires and crises, and that we are connected through the digital space, and that we are connected through the ages through the power of the Holy Spirit. Presente. My own story of being introduced to the practice of saying presente to honor those who have gone on to the Church Triumphant occurred when I was the United States Executive Director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, an international organization dedicated to peace and the struggle for human rights and dignity through active nonviolence. I was blessed to spend 4 years in that role, in between serving as campus minister at UC Davis and where I now serve at Epworth in Berkeley. And each year at the annual meeting, activists and leaders gathered at our headquarters just outside of New York City overlooking the Hudson River, where past members such as Martin Luther King Jr., Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, civil rights heroes Dorothy Cotton and Vincent Harding and Daniel Berrigan, as well as champion of the poor Dorothy Day, all members had also gathered. We stood in circle and named those who had passed away in the year before, activists and friends who had given their lives in the struggle for life. As each name was lifted, the whole community responded, presente. Presente. It means to have lived well, it means to have died well, and ultimately it is a witness to resurrection and eternal life. It means something. It means everything. And as I open the CFA report and budget presentation today, I want to return to something I've said before. The numbers in finance reports and budgets are always, in themselves, just taken them alone, they mean nothing. They mean nothing. Numbers in finance reports and budgets are always just symbols of something larger. They're symbols of the ministry that's being lived and witnessed to in our annual conference. Throughout this report, I invite you to remember that each one of these numbers gives witness to life, present and active, and life eternal. Presente. Well, California, Nevada, and I think, is the PowerPoint presentation available? There it is. Our general and, wait a minute. Well, California, Nevada, after more than a year of challenge, we get to have yet another celebration about our giving and our progress. For the fourth year in a row, we have achieved 100% of our giving to the general and jurisdictional church. Congratulations. These numbers of 100% symbolize a pulsing, breathing ministry present and happening across the globe. Our general and jurisdictional apportionments allow local congregations, through the coordination of the annual conference, to pool a portion of our own collections to accomplish things that are either beyond our ability to do as individual congregations or that can be done more efficiently or effectively together. Things like the Ministerial Education Fund, which accounts for about 1/8 of our total contribution, MEF supports the 13 United Methodist seminaries, as well as materials for the recruitment for new clergy and local pastors. General church apportionments have also allowed us to develop resources for promoting safe and inclusive environments, as well as trainings on preventing harassment and abuse. These resources are now used across the connection. Examples include our Safe Sanctuaries programs and the implicit bias curriculum available from the General Commission on Religion and Race. Apportionments allow the church to create collective goods funded by all for the benefit of all in response to God's call and vision. These numbers give witness to our faith through and our commitment to a connectional church. Now, please don't misunderstand. It's not just the connectional dimension of our global communion that I'm talking about here. It's also our connection with each other. Each year, many churches are able to give 100% of their tithe, and we give thanks to God for that. And for a variety of reasons, some local churches aren't able to get there in spite of their best efforts. These churches are precious to us and valued and loved too. And in still other cases, some local churches are able to go beyond the tithe to our connectional ministry. We are a living, breathing body, present to each other, as together we give. When we achieve 100%, the attaining of this goal is owned by all of us. So let's give ourselves another hand. I cannot overstate the distance that we've traveled as a conference in fulfilling our commitment to general and jurisdictional ministries. For the last 3 quadrennia, beginning in 2005, we did not even reach 2/3 of our share. But together, through your focus and commitment, our conference collaboration and the focus of Bishop Carcagno, our cabinet, our CFA, we've made a huge leap forward with 100% fulfillment for the quadrennium just completed. That's not just 1 year of 100%. That's 4 years in a row. Congratulations. Good job, Cal Nevada. And really, this is quite miraculous when you take into account that the quadrennium ended with the year 2020. And 2020 was the first year of the pandemic. We were able to make it through 2020 in the black due to 3 key factors. First, the conference secured a payroll protection program loan from the federal government of $478,696, which has now been converted to a grant. Second, expense savings resulted from remote work, online committee meetings, and a virtual annual conference session. And third, though tithing decreased by 10.9% in 2020 from 2019, this decrease was not as large as we had feared, and we were adjusting all along through the year to make allowance for that. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to our diligent and steady Executive Director of Finance and Administration, also known as our Conference Treasurer, Diane Knudsen. Diane jumped to action when the payroll protection program was announced and created webinars and offered counsel for churches to receive this needed support. Several of our local churches were even able to secure the second round of PPP funding. Thank you to Diane and the finance and administration team, which includes Ajesh Kumar and new accounting manager, Angelina Garcia. You'll remember that last year I shared that for 2021, this year, we were moving to a new strategy for budgeting, bringing what we actually expected to receive in line with what we expect to spend. This corrected what had really been a structural deficit, because in the past, we had passed budgets that assumed all churches would give a full tithe, and as I just mentioned, that doesn't always happen. We know this has not been historically true. There's faithfulness to this former approach, assuming that we'll have 100% in every single local church in the annual conference. It trusts everyone to do what we've covenanted to do. But we know, for a variety of reasons, pandemics, hard times, and natural disasters among them, all of our churches don't get to a full tithe. So now we are building our budgets based on actual tithes we received in the year previous. This approach has helped us not to slip too far behind in 2021. Right now, income is lagging about 10% behind what we have spent in 2021. And so I want to say, remember that church income can come from a variety of sources. The more typical sources are individual giving, facility use, fundraisers, and grants. But new ministries, reaching out to new people, also often leads to new giving. I hope you'll take the renewal and inspiration you're receiving here at annual conference to go home and make sure you are current on your tithing for 2021. We turn now to the 2022 budget proposal. I'm very proud of this budget because it represents a significant step forward in outcome-based budgeting in our programmatic ministry areas. Core Team Chair Sam Yun just spoke now of how earlier this year, layperson and consultant Gwen Bortner worked with each committee underneath each ministry focus area to clarify their goals and outcomes that they sought and to support those goals with their requested budget allowance for 2022. Not only will this new way of thinking about budgeting for our programmatic ministry in the annual conference help us measure impact, it also helps us be more precise in knowing what funds are needed to accomplish our vision. I trust that you join me in appreciation for this hard work and look forward to hearing reports of the impact of this new strategic approach to both ministry and budgeting at next year's annual conference. CFA's goals are to operate with collaboration, transparency, and faithfulness with respect to the administration and financial assets of the annual conference, to offer analysis and interpretation to undergird sound decision-making, and to predict financial needs and note trends so that we can react thoughtfully, sustaining financial health and fulfilling commitments. And so now the moment that you've been waiting for, the proposed 2022 budget. As I said, a key goal for us is transparency. So here is slide 1 of our 10-slide budget proposal. What? What's that you say? You say you can't read it? Numbers too small? Too much detail? Well, don't worry. This actually isn't what I'm going to present. This level of detail is available to you, but in your packet, you have a budget that is easier to read and easier to understand. But I wanted to share this slide with you to let you know that we're serious about transparency. If you ever would like to have a more detailed look at expenses or income or the spending of a particular committee, you just need to ask. And you can also go to the Finance and Administration page of the conference website for more reports and documents related to our finances. So now here you see a more readable version of the proposed 2022 budget. This is item number 1 in the packet of recommendations, resolutions, and petitions. As we began doing last year, this budget shows a more complete picture of the financial activity of the conference by listing the funds beyond tithing, which we will be using to support ministry and mission in the next year. Those funds are indicated by the alphabetical code you see in the budget proposal. You'll note that the tithe budget and spending plan for 2022 are lower than 2021 by a small amount, a projected decrease of 2.5%. The reductions in expenses were achieved by consolidating 2 staff administrative positions into 1 when the incumbents of those positions left their positions, and a projected decrease in general and jurisdictional apportionments. Each year, CFA follows the guidance in our standing rules in setting what is known as the Tithe Base, derived from the total income of all local churches in the previous year. The Tithe Base then sets the limit for budgeting for the following year. This is detailed in Section 5 of the standing rules and reads as follows. Standing Rules, Division 5, Finance, D3. Each February 15th, the conference treasurer shall report to the Council on Finance and Administration the total amount of income as reported on line 52Z of Table 3 by all churches and fellowships for the calendar year immediately preceding the annual conference session. The conference treasurer will subtract any parsonage rental income up to the amount of the pastor's housing allowance. This amount shall be known as the congregational tithe base. In D5, it states, the Council on Finance and Administration shall recommend a budget to the annual conference whose total shall not exceed 10% of the congregational tithing base as reported by the conference treasurer in D3 above. The number reported on line 52Z of Table 3 by all churches last year was 55,652,963. 10% of that number is 5.56 million, which is less than the projected tithe income you see on this budget proposal of 5.83 million. So before we vote on the proposed 2022 budget on Sunday, CFA will be recommending a suspension of this standing rule. Now, normally, I believe setting a budget ceiling in keeping with the previous year's total local church income is a sound and helpful practice. But we have not been in a normal time. So let me explain why CFA feels it's necessary and appropriate to recommend a suspension of this standing rule this year. First, several churches did not report last year, so their income was not included in line 52Z. We do know what those churches contributed to the tithe. Was it a full tithe? We don't know. We didn't get the reports. But conservatively, we can add what they did contribute to last year's tithe to next year's tithe projection. So you see that on the slide there. And second, 2020 total income on line 52Z did not include PPP funds. Though PPP funds aren't coming back, the income they replaced is already starting to come back. Diane Knudsen has reported that we are already recovering from 2020, and 2022 will continue that recovery. In 2019, actual tithe giving was 5.83 million. 2020's tithe giving dipped to 5.189 million. Our tithe income in this year, 2021, is projected to be 5.54 million. And finally, the expectation is that we will be able to return to 2019's level of giving in 2022. This progression leaves us with a curve that looks like this, which you see on the screen, which I call our recovery curve. So in summary, the proposed 2022 budget remains balanced, reduces spending in staffing costs, and projects a decrease in connectional apportionments, continues transparency through the alphabetical code, and projects a return to 2019 giving. Voting on the recommendation to suspend the standing rules related to the tithe base ceiling and the proposed 2022 budget will occur Sunday morning. And this will be preceded by a time of questions and answers and discussion. So please take time to peruse these documents. We always welcome your questions. That's really the fun part, to get into an engagement with you around our plans and projections. And thank you very much for your attention.